Hello, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to the mid-year budget review for the Monte City Council on the state. And as we traditionally do, we'll start with a roll call vote. So I have the city clerk please take roll call.
Councilmember Lopez. Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rue.
Present.
Mayor Dutray.
Right here. So all members are present. And the next item obviously is the annual mid-year budget review. This, I believe today will be a very lengthy process. Will also include a discussion of Measure L and also discussion of the unfunded liability related to CalPERS. So I'm going to hand this over to staff. As far as our presentation, I know again this is a long review, so if there are, I'll try to maybe certain parts of this presentation after expenditures, after revenues, after the analysis for the mid-year, along with after Measure L and after the CalPERS presentations, we can ask questions or make comments as we go. So with that, I will give it to the staff. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. By popular demand, our finance manager, Janet Colbeck, will be doing the bulk of this evening's presentation, but I will certainly be in standby to jump in whenever I feel appropriate and also available to respond to any questions that members of the City Council have. So with that, I give you Janet Colbeck, our finance manager.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, City staff. I'm here to present our fiscal year 2021 mid-year budget review. Oops. Wrong spot. There we go. So first, we're going to discuss the summary of recommended changes to the fiscal year 2021 general fund appropriations budget. So the departments requested a total of $587,205 in admin services, fire, and public works. The city manager is recommending a change of $447,905. So for city council, there were no changes. City manager, no changes. Administrative services, were increasing the personnel special consulting services by $4,500 due to an unanticipated increase in workers' compensation related matters due to COVID-19. So, and we did under budget this. We under budget, obviously, probably several things because we weren't sure what our revenues were going to be due to the pandemic. So that's going to be increased by $4,500. Personnel psychological assistance is being increased by $6,000. This is due to more recruitments than we expected for this fiscal year. Also, personnel medical examinations increasing by $4,500, basically for the same reasons. The number of recruitments is above the projections. Personnel testing, same reasons. The increase in recruitments, we're increasing that by $7,000. Personnel psychological examinations, same thing. Recruitments are up, so we're requesting to increase that by $4,000. So the total amount for administrative services increases is $26,000. For human services, no changes there. Community development as well, and city attorney, no increases. For the police department, all of these increases are going to net to a zero amount because they're all going to be transferred. Budget amounts are going to be transferred from other accounts that have amounts that are available that there haven't been expenditures. So for the police department administration dues and memberships, they need an additional $900. They have several annual membership dues that are upcoming, and staff members need to continue to receive the benefits of membership in these associations. So that's going to be increased by $900. We're achieving that by transferring $900 from technical services, special contract services. This account so far this fiscal year has seen no expenditures, and that's due to the schools being closed for the pandemic, and the school crossing guards have not been needed. So you'll see this account used several times for the police department, but there will be sufficient funds in that account left over if the schools do reopen for the next couple of months. So we will be able to still cover the crossing guards. So support services overtime, they're requesting an additional $2,000. Because of ongoing recruitments and pre-employment investigations, it frequently requires additional time and effort to accomplish this. So this $2,000 will be achieved through a transfer from Uniform Patrol regular earnings. Support services, books, and publications, they're requesting an increase of $375. And this is due to they need to, the current budget, they still have 5159 left, and that's going to be needed to purchase vehicle code books. And there are additional books that will be required, so they're increasing this $375, and that will also be transferred from technical services, special contract services. So the records overtime, because of staff members who have been out for medical reasons, this account is overexpended. And so in order to maintain minimum shift coverage in the records division, backfill is required. They're requesting an increase of $5,000, which will be achieved by transferring $5,000 from records regular earnings. Records office supplies, this account was reduced by $6,000 during the budget planning process, so they're requesting an additional $1,000 to maintain an adequate supply of required forms for department use. This will be achieved by transferring those funds from technical services, special contract services. Investigations overtime, this account was also reduced during the budget process. And due to the unpredictable nature of criminal activity, they're requesting an additional $30,000 to cover the cost of call-outs and holdovers that are required to initiate and complete criminal investigations. This is going to be achieved by transferring those funds from Uniform Patrol regular earnings. Investigation special contract services. So they have $6,305 remaining in this account to pay for the annual software fee for the Leica laser scanning forensic mapping system. But the vendor for this software, Precision Survey Supply, informed staff that an upgrade to the software is also recommended, which will cost an additional $2,400. Precision Survey Supply is offering a special pricing as an existing customer, making the total $7,360 for the subscription fee and the upgrade. And if we were to hold off and not do this upgrade until next fiscal year, the upgrade alone will cost $7,000. So they are recommending an increase by $1,055 to pay for the upgrade as well as the subscription fee, and that will be achieved by transferring those funds from technical services, special contract services. Investigations, medical services. So this account was also reduced during the budget process, and these funds pay for the annual contract for use of the Children's Assessment Center to obtain medical and forensic services as needed to examine and diagnose children of suspected sexual and/or physical abuse, as well as pay for each medical examination and/or evidentiary interview. So this account is overspent. They're requesting an additional $1,200, and that will be achieved by transferring that money from technical services, special contract services. Uniform Patrol overtime. This account was also reduced during the budget planning process, and due to unfilled vacancies throughout the fiscal year and many officers out due to medical reasons, this account is overexpended. So they're requesting an increase of $400,000. This will be achieved by transferring $300 from Uniform Patrol regular earnings and the amount that's already budgeted in account Fund 1149, Uniform Patrol overtime. Uniform Patrol uniforms. So this account was also reduced by $7,000 during the budget, and as of February 11th, it's overspent. They've had, new hires and of officers and dispatchers during the fiscal year, and in order to outfit current and new employees for the remainder of the fiscal year, they're recommending an increase of $6,000. That will be achieved by a transfer from technical services, special contract services. Uniform Patrol personnel protective equipment. So this was also reduced during the budget process, and officers are required to wear a concealable ballistic body armor or vest while on duty that has to be replaced every 5 years. Vests were recently purchased for 9 new officers. We have 3 police officer trainees who will need vests upon graduation from the police academy, and we hope to fill 2 officer vacancies in the near future. And so they're recommending that this be increased by $7,000, which will be achieved through a transfer from technical services, special contract services, and also through the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant. The city will receive reimbursement for each vest at 50% of the total cost. Uniform patrol diesel fuel. As of February 11th, this account is overspent, and it's recommended to increase the appropriation by $3,000, which will be achieved by transferring these funds from the Technical Services Special Contract Services account. Uniform Patrol Special Contract Services. This account, which pays for security services at the Montclair Trans Center, was reduced by $7,000 during the budget planning process. But starting in January 2021, Securitas Security Services USA, the company that provides the service, increased the hourly wage for its security guards. Therefore, to ensure enough funds are available to cover this service throughout the remainder of the year, it is recommended to increase the initial appropriation by $24,000. This will be achieved by a transfer from Technical Services Special Contract Services account. Uniform Patrol Medical Services. This account was also reduced by $10,000 during the budget planning process and is overspent. These funds pay for prisoner blood withdrawals, blood alcohol kits, drug screens, and monthly phlebotomy and SART on-call fees. In order to cover the overage in this account and ensure funds are available for the remainder of the fiscal year, they're recommending initial increase of $30,000. This will be achieved by transferring that amount from Technical Services Special Contract Services. Uniform Patrol Personnel Training. This account was also reduced during the budget planning process. There's some invoices that have been put through but had not posted to this account as of January. And it's been covering basic police academy fees for their new officers. During the remainder of the fiscal year, we will be sending officers to field officer training, interview and interrogation training for our new detective, and sergeant school for our new sergeants, just to name a few. So they're recommending an increase of $10,000, which will be achieved with a transfer from Technical Services Special Contract Services. And then lastly, for Police Department Communications Overtime, this account was also reduced during the budget planning process. And due to a vacancy freeze, a vacancy since September 23rd, 2020, and dispatchers out due to medical reasons, this account is overexpended by $34,225. So, a new dispatcher trainee was hired on February 3rd, but this will not alleviate any dependency on this overtime account until the employee has completed training. So they're recommending an increase of $50,000, and that will be achieved by a transfer from Uniform Patrol regular earnings. So as you can see, that's in a zero impact to the general fund. So now we move on to the fire department. Their overtime was reduced during the budget planning process, and due to unfilled vacancies, medical leave, and strike team responses, this account is overexpended. They requested $342,500 increase. The city manager has reduced that to $300,000. Emergency services uniforms. This account was reduced during the budget planning process. Uniforms were purchased for recently hired firefighters, and 2 more firefighters will need to be hired to fill current vacancies that will also need uniforms. In order to outfit current and new employees for the remainder of the fiscal year, it is recommended an increase of $20,000. This amount was reduced by the city manager to $9,000. Emergency services personnel protective equipment. This account was also reduced during the budget planning process and is now overspent. 2 complete sets of turnouts are required for each firefighter, and we recently hired 5 new firefighters with the potential of hiring 2 more to fill current vacancies. Also, with the 10-year life expectancy of turnouts, we will need to replace many sets that have met their life expectancy to bring all personnel into compliance. They requested a $75,000 increase. The city manager reduced that to $20,000. Okay, emergency services miscellaneous expenditures. This account was also reduced during the budget planning process. Throughout the fiscal year, rehab supplies and other miscellaneous supplies are needed to keep personnel in a state of readiness to respond to emergency incidents. Some of these expenditures, such as fuel, have not posted to this account yet. Therefore, to ensure enough funds are available for the remainder of the fiscal year, it is recommended increasing the initial appropriation by $500, and this is being accomplished through a transfer from the Emergency Services Maintenance account. Personnel Development, Books and Publications, this account was reduced during the budget planning process. An increase in funds in this account is needed in order to purchase IFSTA manuals for all new firefighters. To cover this expense, it is recommended to increase the initial appropriation by $500, which is being accomplished through a transfer from Emergency Services Maintenance Communications Equipment. Personnel Development Program Supplies. This account is used to purchase training supplies for all new probationary firefighters to facilitate their training, such as wood for ventilation training props, and the cost of wood has doubled since the start of the pandemic. It is recommended to increase the initial appropriation by $4,000. $1,900 of this is being achieved through a transfer from Emergency Services Medical Examinations, making the general fund effect $2,100. Emergency Medical Services Program Supplies, this is fund account 1180. The call volume for emergency medical services increased due to the current pandemic, and the use of medical supplies has seen a corresponding increase. Therefore, they are recommending an increase of $1,500, and that is being accomplished from a general fund account, Emergency Services, Materials, Miscellaneous, Maintenance, and Repair. Lastly, for the fire department, emergency medical services license permit certificates. So this account was reduced during the budget planning process. Funds are needed to pay for certifications for new hires and for employees that need to renew their certifications. It is recommended to increase the initial appropriation by $1,500, which is being accomplished through a transfer from the Emergency Services Materials Miscellaneous Maintenance and Repairs account. So the net increase to the fire department is $331,100. Now we're into Public Works, Management and Construction Special Consulting Services. So this account is currently negative $1,300. A payment of $3,300 was made to Padilla and Associates for their work on DBE goals for our Central Bridge project. No additional work by Padilla and Associates is expected this fiscal year. An increase to the original budget is requested to remove the deficit in this account. Oops. What did I do? Sorry. 1 second. Okay. Little technical issue.
There you go.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, Public Works Streets overtime. So the overtime is already at $13,593 actually for this account, and it is anticipated that they will need an additional $7,000 for overtime for the remainder of the fiscal year. Parks overtime, this account is currently negative $9,817. This requested amount for the increase of $15,000 includes overtime necessary to repair all of the city parks, Golden Girls softball field, and Little League baseball fields in anticipation of the reopening of these city facilities this coming spring. Streets uniforms, the budget was reduced during the budget process, and there have been new employees, and that requires startup costs to get them outfitted for uniforms. So with 2 new employees starting soon, additional uniforms, including uniform startup costs and boots, they're requesting an increase of $2,300. Vehicle maintenance propane, the budget was reduced by $5,000, and there's been a rate increase for propane. They are requesting an increase of $7,000 that was reduced to $2,000 by the city manager. Vehicle maintenance compressed natural gas. This budget was also reduced during the budget process, and there has been a rate increase from $2.25 to $3 for compressed natural gas. So they requested an additional $9,300 that was reduced to $7,000 by the city manager. Vehicle maintenance transportation work equipment. So the budget was reduced during the process, and there was an unexpected vehicle collision cost of $11,017 to Police Department Unit 416. There have been several large expenses that have caused this account to become insufficient. They are requesting an increase of $15,000. The city manager is recommending a $10,000 increase. And this police department vehicle was parked at the time, and it was hit by another vehicle. That claim has been submitted to the other party's insurance, but it could be some time before we get any restitution for that loss. Sewer maintenance services overtime. This account is currently overspent, and so they requested a $15,000 increase. The city manager is recommending a $9,000 increase. Building maintenance overtime. This account is currently negative $6,333, and they are requesting a $13,500 increase, which does not include overtime necessary to operate the splash pad. We're not sure if that's going to open at this point, so the city manager is recommending a $6,500 increase. Okay. The building maintenance uniforms, this account is currently negative $245. The requested amount is required to rent shirts and pants for the remainder of the fiscal year. So they're requesting a $2,000 increase. The city manager is recommending $1,500. Building maintenance special contract services. Special contract services includes monthly pest control and fire ant prevention at a monthly cost of $1,210 and $950 respectively. An increase to the original budget is requested, which should be sufficient to carry this account through the end of the year. So they are requesting $13,000. Heating and air conditioning overtime. This account is currently negative $2,867, and they are expecting an equal amount of overtime for the remainder of the year. They are requesting an $8,000 increase. The city manager is recommending a $3,000 increase. Public Works Department, continued heating and air conditioning, materials, miscellaneous maintenance and repair. This account has a remaining budget of $4,658. Pending projects that will affect this account are the replacement of the compressor in the main youth center AC, the replacement of the compressor in the youth center ice maker, and one scheduled routine AC maintenance replacing filters and belts. So they are requesting an increase of $11,705 to this account. Janitorial services overtime. This account is currently negative $30. It is anticipated an equal amount of overtime will be required for the remainder of the fiscal year, so they're requesting an additional $1,500. So this results in a net increase to the general fund of $81,805 and an increase to the sewer operating fund of $9,000 for a total of $90,805 for Public Works. And citywide had no changes. So the statement of general fund expenditures for the 6-month period ending December 31st. So this basically just gives you an overview of each department, what their expenditures are to date, how much they're expended. And you see at the bottom for the entire city, 62% expended. Now, if you look at citywide above that, it shows 91%. That is due to the fact that the unfunded liability for PERS has already been paid for the entire year. So that's why that's showing a 91% expenditure percentage. Okay, so right down here at the bottom, that 91% for citywide, that's it due to the unfunded liability being completely paid. So that's raising up the 62% here, and that would be less if that wasn't completely expended for the year.
Great, so I think that ends. Any questions on expenditures from council? Any hands up or no? Nobody wants to speak on expenditures? I just have one question on expenditures regarding FEMA and CARES reimbursement. With the overtime spoken of, was any CARES funds or FEMA funds reimbursement coming in to cover some of the overtime, especially in public safety?
Well, it did come in, but it wasn't for overtime. It could only be used for regular earnings. We received approximately $486,000 from the state. That money was allocated to regular earnings in the police department. That is one of the reasons why there was significant availability within the department to fund other over expenditures within their operating budget. And a similar amount of money was received from the county through the $282 million that the county received in CARES Act funding. That money was allocated to regular earnings in the fire department. So basically almost a total of $1 million was brought into the city through available CARES Act funding.
Okay, all right, so that I understand. Bill, Mayor Pro Tem Rue, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's not a question, it's actually a compliment. I really appreciated seeing that we looked at a grant for the bulletproof vests. I think that's creative thinking at a time when things are more difficult. This is a great way to get some of the items we need, and I hope that kind of thinking will continue.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for saying that, Councilmember Rue. That is a grant actually that we go after every single year, and we're successful in receiving funding. It covers approximately half the amount of the purchase of the required bulletproof vest that we have to purchase on an annual basis. I also want to compliment all of the departments because, as you know, during the budget process for the beginning of this year, we reduced the current budget by approximately $2.5 million over the below the previous year's budget. And you can quite clearly see that based on today's mid-year adjustments, that the departments have, for the most part, lived within the reduced requirements that were placed on them. Obviously, there have been some adjustments, but we certainly have lived within the requirements that were imposed without further requiring significant drawdown on available reserves.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands going up or requests. Let's go on to revenue next.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to discuss the general fund revenue detail for the 6 months ending December 31st, 2020. Okay, so in our first column there, you see the mid-year actual for the year so far, our 2020-21 adopted budget in the second column. The third column shows our revised numbers, and the fourth column shows the increase and or decrease. So there were minimal increases in taxes, with the exception of, thankfully, our Measure L passed the voters. So we are anticipating, based on, with the pandemic, we were figuring maybe $7 million that first year. So we prorated and we're estimating a 1.75 million revenue from that new tax. That is just an estimate. It could be less. We're just not sure at this point because we have nothing to go by to determine what that number might be. So overall for taxes, we have a little over $2 million increase. For licenses and permits, we have a decrease of $7,500. That is due to a decrease in yard sale permits, since due to the pandemic, we weren't allowing those, and construction permits are down $5,000. Intergovernmental revenues is flat. The motor vehicle in lieu and the police officer training reimbursement are down $10,000 each, but we increased the SB 90 claim reimbursement by $20,000, so that turns out to be a wash. Fines and forfeitures down $109,200, and that's largely due to the vehicle impound fees. We budgeted $200,000, but we've only received $28,000 so far this year, so we reduced that down to $100,000. Charges for services, a reduction of $83,800. And so there were a couple of increases, mainly in fire department service fees. That looks like, we increased that because we've already received $13,000. Other ones, basically due to the pandemic, we're not providing all of the services, so we're not collecting those fees. Miscellaneous revenue is down a total of $294,000, and that's mainly due to the other miscellaneous revenue. So thankfully, with Measure L passing, we're showing an increase, estimated an increase in revenue of just over $1.5 million. So you see that's our amount right there that we're expecting for estimating. So now general fund analysis,
Go ahead.
the mid-year review. Okay. So this is just a summary of the revenues, what was adopted, our actual, what our proposed revised is, and what our increased decreases. So as I stated in the prior slide, we have an increase of $1.5 million in revenue. Our expenditures, we're increasing the expenditures by $447,905. So that gives us a net increase in revenues of $1,065,979. So this tab, or this slide, I'm sorry, shows what is unassigned in the general operating fund and our general reserves. Let's see. So we started our 1920 audited numbers for the general fund unassigned is $4,795,696. We have current uses and transfers, so we estimated the budget balances are $5.8 million will be at the end of the fiscal year. And this includes, we're looking at all of the transfers from the reserves that we needed to budget the 2021 budget. So those are all included in here. Oh, okay. Thank you. So right now, we're at a total for the general fund, unassigned and assigned at $12,552,000 where we started. At the end of the fiscal year, we're estimating $12,922,000. So revising the city's appropriations budget increases the spending authority by $447,905 in the general operating fund. Revising the city's estimated revenue budget has a total positive impact to the general operating fund of $1,513,884. Approval of both the appropriations and estimated revenues budgets would have a positive budgetary impact to the general operating fund of $1,065,979. Staff recommends the City Council consider the city's mid-year budget review documents and approve proposed changes to the fiscal year 2021 budget. Any questions at this point?
Any questions for staff on the revenue or on the recommendation? I got a question here on the revenue side. Say general fund taxes, transaction use tax, measure F, November of $3,538. What's that about? I know it's a small number, but I just got my curiosity up.
Oh, okay, yes, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. The majority of the Measure F transaction and use tax goes to payment of the 2014 lift revenue bonds.
Oh, okay.
And that is in its own separate fund. So this is just the remaining amount. Once that's paid, this is the only amount that the general fund will receive of the transaction and use tax.
Okay, and then another question I have is, have we received our, we haven't received our second quarter sales taxes yet. The actual amounts from HDL, that covers the Christmas holiday season. That's not been received.
No, we have not. No,
Okay.
we've only received the third quarter or the first quarter of the calendar of the fiscal year. And their numbers are not actuals, they're projected estimates. We won't actually have the actuals until next year.
Okay.
But the numbers are, they're not excellent. As Janet indicated, the reason for the positive number is the Measure L money that will come into the city's coffers, starting with collection on April 1st of this year. The really great performing tax source that occurred during the course of this last year has actually not been from a city source, but it's been from the county pool. The county pool collects the funds from Amazon and other online services during the bulk of the pandemic when the brick and mortars were closed. That did not inhibit people from shopping online, and in fact, they were shopping online more than ever. And a result of that shopping effort, the county pools increased by something like 66%, and that produced substantial tax revenues for distribution to the various taxing agencies in San Bernardino County. One thing to be aware of as it relates to the county pools is that there is a statewide effort on the part of certain agencies that host these warehouses that provide online services. And that effort is to try and make certain that they hold on to all of the sales tax revenue by declaring to have themselves identified as the POSs point of sales. And so if that designation is confirmed by the state or by courts, then that would have a significant impact on the county pools throughout the state, and agencies that do not have those warehouses, or even those that do have warehouses but not a significant number, would see a serious impact on their sales tax revenues. So there are only a few cities in the entire state that have been fortunate in achieving that level of recognition by the state as being identified as the POS. Here locally in San Bernardino County, the city of Ontario has struggled through various court cases to have itself identified as a POS. But so far, Ontario has lost every case that has gone forward as it relates to that. So that's fortunate for all of the cities in San Bernardino County, maybe not so fortunate for the city of Ontario, but certainly fortunate for the other cities in the county that we continue to enjoy and share in that county pool. Now, certainly for cities like the city of Montclair that has a lot of brick and mortar, and a lot of that business has moved from the brick and mortar to Amazon, or rather to the county pool. Montclair, perhaps as much as any other city in the county other than San Bernardino County, other than Ontario, could probably claim that if you look at Montclair's prorated sales tax revenues based on brick and mortar, we should have a larger share of the county pool. Unfortunately, the formula isn't based on that, it's based on population. So we actually receive a diminished share of the county pool that we would otherwise receive if our brick and mortars were calculated into that process. So we need to keep our fingers crossed that the current process stays at least the way it is, even though it may have an adverse impact on Montclair because the formula doesn't favor brick and mortar count, but population. But at least based on population, we share equally in that that sales tax money that goes into the county pool, because of the fact that this county has not ended up recognizing that just because you have warehouses in your particular city, that you get the POS identification, and therefore that sales tax money stays in your cities. But it is the county pool that has been the bright spot for sales tax revenues for the cities in San Bernardino County.
And then I know you had an audit done. Is the audit done yet?
So that is the next few slides.
Yeah.
All right, let's go with that next. I have a question with the audit, but if there's no more questions, then let's move on to the next slide. And then at the end of when we're done with all the presentation, we'll come back and make a motion on the recommendation.
Okay. So now we're going to discuss the fiscal year 1920 year-end audit, and as it relates to the fiscal year 2021 mid-year review. So for the fiscal year 2021 general fund budget, general operating fund appropriations were $28,730,780. General operating fund revenue estimate was $27,448,646, and the general operating fund deficit was $1,182,134. General fund deficit eliminated by the following actions: $528,124 produced from personnel layoffs, $754,010 transfers in from the traffic safety fund of $100,000, and $654,010 from the general fund special purpose reserves. So our fiscal year 2019-20 end of year audit. The fiscal year 2019-20 estimated ending balance was $6,157,953. The fiscal year 2020-21 estimated ending balance is $5,750,543.
This is for the unassigned reserve we're talking about.
Yes, I'm sorry. The 2019-20 end of year audit actual for the general fund unassigned reserve balance was $4,795,696,000.
So you'll recall that in a previous slide, that projection was $5.8 million.
The city sales tax performance earnings, all areas, down by an estimated 24.7% second quarter 2020 and 5.2% third quarter 2020 due to economic impacts from COVID-19. Recommendation. Staff recommends the City Council consider allocating the $1,065,979 General Operating Fund Revenue Mid-Year Projected Balance after approval of appropriations and estimated revenue adjustments to the General Fund Unassigned Reserve for a balance of $5,861,675.
So that action basically returns us to what our projected general fund unassigned reserve balance was at the beginning of this current year.
Okay. So again, so as far as revenue is concerned, sales tax revenue is concerned, the audit came back and said that for the third quarter, fourth quarter, is it? I know the fourth quarter we were most concerned about. That's from April, May, and June. The audit to determine what's when you made this budget presentation back in June, what you were estimated to be loss of revenue from sales taxes was accurate. Then is that what the audit sustained?
Yes, it shows that. Well, this is an HDL number actually. It shows that the sales tax revenues for the second quarter declined by 24.7%.
Right.
And in the third quarter, which is the only additional data that we have available, the decline is negative 5.2%. There was obviously a decline in the first quarter of the calendar year as well, but most of the impact of COVID-19 didn't come until the second quarter when the stay-at-home order was issued by the governor.
Second quarter, yeah, not fiscal year 2020, calendar year 2020. And the audit has confirmed this, or that it has not been determined yet from the audit?
The audit determined what the expenditures were. It didn't. It doesn't focus. They don't focus on what declines in sales tax operations are. That comes from HDL.
HDL. So basically, the audit confirmed the fund balances essentially. So.
Yes, and these numbers are confirmed by HDL. The numbers that are before you right now.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. I don't see any hands raised. Anybody want to talk? So I will continue. Let's continue on then.
Thank you. Now we will discuss Measure L. So Measure L. This was approved by voters at the November 8th, 2020 general municipal election by a 68.8% voter approval. The polling placed the passage at 70%, so the polling was pretty spot on. Estimated annual earnings is $8.7 million for fiscal year 21-22. Collection of Measure L begins April 1st, 2021.
Now, I want to stress that $8.7 million is based on the current performance of the transaction use tax for Measure F. We obviously have no real data on Measure L. All we have is data on Measure F. So based on that performance for Measure F, our projection, as you can see, it's above what we were using as the tail end of the argument as it relates to Measure L. We were talking about $7 million as far as the generation. You recall actually early on when we were looking at a transactions and use tax district, a second transaction use tax district, we were projecting $9.3 million. So the rebound appears to be better than we had anticipated, but not as good as we would hope for. So $8.7 million is based on the trending under Measure F.
So Measure L is a general purpose tax measure. It required a simple majority to pass. Special taxes require approval of 2/3 of those voting and are used for specific projects or purposes as designated in the tax measure. So Measure L is a general purpose tax measure. Measure L funds are deposited and commingled into the general fund for all general government operating functions and cannot be assigned exclusively for specific purposes or projects to the exclusion of all general fund operations. Measure L funds can be used for annual bond payments, capital purchases, personnel costs, services and supplies, infrastructure projects, and other general government operations. The budgetary allocation of Measure L general fund tax revenues is a fiduciary responsibility of the governing body. The City Council approves the annual city budget, which functions as a public template for city operations. The city's City Council's fiduciary responsibility cannot be delegated to unelected individuals. Citizen oversight of Measure L funds is difficult to achieve because Measure L funds are commingled in the city's general fund, and these funds are then allocated by the City Council for general government purposes through budgetary action. The City Council's approval of the annual budget blueprint is not subject to pre-approval by a committee of citizens. Citizen oversight should not function to preview the governing body's fiduciary responsibilities. Conversely, special tax measure funds can be subject to oversight because funds derived from a special tax are dedicated to a specific purpose, and citizen oversight can be a procedure to ensure funds are committed to their lawful purpose. Citizen oversight of general fund expenditures may best be accomplished by reporting to a panel of citizens on funds earmarked for a bond measure used to finance capital infrastructure projects. Report to citizens on the status of projects financed by a bond measure. So here we're listing some of the potential projects that some of the Measure L money can be used for if we do a capital infrastructure bond.
Now, please keep in mind that this is a list of projects that were put together by the Public Works Department. These are real projects. These are projects that the city needs to work on. Obviously, some of them would need to be prioritized based on the time that it is going to take to complete some of these projects. That will be discussed at the tail end of this particular slide sequence. But clearly, given the number of projects, when it comes to bonds, you only have 3 years in which to expend the bond money. So we will not be able to do all of these projects under one bond. We will have to probably look at multiple bonds in order to achieve all of these projects. We simply don't have the staffing. We don't have the project management capability in place. We only have one project manager, and we don't have the other available personnel that would allow us to compress this long list of projects into a 3-year time frame. So when we get to the end of this discussion, we'll talk about the total amount of these particular projects. Some of them we cannot give you an amount on because we don't know what that is. So those are excluded from that final tally. But we do try to give you some estimates to give you an indication of when we do look at those projects, what you will be looking at as it relates to costs. So with that, we'll proceed through the list of potential projects for the City Council's consideration. And obviously, to achieve these, they could be achieved over the course of years and decades if we were only to rely on the funding as it comes in. But of course, these types of projects are best achieved by bonding them out so that you can do them as part of a cohesive infrastructure improvement plan.
Okay, so to start off the projects, Central Avenue Rehabilitation Phase 2, estimated at $4.525 million. Zone 5 Residential Pavement Rehabilitation, estimated at $2.5 million.
And I just want to point out that obviously, as you know, we have been doing all of the residential areas throughout the community. We've zoned them and have done repaving in a majority of the city. We still have a number of areas to do, and Zone 5 constitutes a substantial portion of the remaining areas that need to be done, although there are still additional residential areas that we need to focus on.
Okay, and then we have the Ramona Avenue Howard Street traffic calming, estimated at $500,000.
You'll recall that this relates specifically to the roundabout at this particular location that was part of the study that we had completed. We have gone after a grant for this, so if a grant is received to complete this project, then this money would fall off of the list as it relates to bonding requirements.
And then we have the San Bernardino Street screen wall, estimated at $310,000.
And just to give you some explanation on this, as you know, on San Bernardino Street, from almost a significant stretch of it, east to Fremont Avenue, across from the hospital on the south side, there is a blank wall that stretches for a good length of San Bernardino in Montclair. In many portions of that area, the wall is very deteriorated, but it is not a city wall. The wall belongs to the individual property owners, and so we can't touch the wall, but what this is proposing is a screening effect that the city could put in that creates an attractive corridor along San Bernardino.
And we also have the Monte Vista Avenue widening and right-of-way acquisition. This is Benito Street north to San Bernardino Street, estimated at $2.35 million.
The issue here is that with the opening of the Monte Vista Avenue grade separation, we are seeing a significant increase in traffic. Unfortunately, there are two bottlenecks. One bottleneck is between Benito Street and San Bernardino Street on Monte Vista Avenue. The other bottleneck is at the I-10 freeway. The I-10 freeway bottleneck is being addressed with the I-10 widening project, but there still remains that bottleneck at this particular location. This project would require acquisition of right-of-way from property owners, probably on the west side of the street, because in the past it appears that there was right-of-way acquisition from property owners on the east side of this particular narrow section. And in order to establish a widening of this particular section, we would need to require right-of-way on the west side, and this would include the acquisition of the right-of-way as well as the paving of that particular area and other curb and gutter work that would need to be done.
And next we have the Monte Vista Avenue median and pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $3.85 million. The Holt Boulevard pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $2 million. Mission Boulevard pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $2.5 million. Mills Avenue median and pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $2 million. Arrow Highway pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $2 million.
Now, I want to point out that that is separate from the Arrow Highway and Fremont improvements that the City Council has already approved at approximately $7 to $8 million, I believe. This would complete Arrow Highway improvements to the west to the city's border with Claremont.
The Richton Street pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $500,000. Benson Avenue pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $1 million. Marino Street.
Now, I want to point out that Benson Avenue is also shared with the City of Ontario, so we would have to enter into an agreement with the City of Ontario to complete pavement and improvements on both sides of the street. That also would extend partly into sharing with Upland as well.
And then the Marino Street pavement rehabilitation and complete streets plan, estimated at $1 million. Next, we have the Monte Vista Avenue median and pavement rehabilitation, estimated at $2.5 million. Caltrans Trans Center land acquisition, estimated is undetermined at this time. Projected purchase price is $18 million.
And just to explain this a little bit, as you know, on the north side of Richton Street, there are 3 parcels that are used for parking at the Trans Center. The city would ultimately like to acquire those areas. They realize very little parking as it relates to transit operations. We would like to eventually purchase that property from Caltrans so that we can use it for housing development projects, including potentially mixed-use projects. On the south side, the parking that is adjacent to the tracks, we would have to enter into an agreement with the developer that would be acquiring the land from the city on the north side of Richton Street to develop those parking areas with parking structures. We would also probably be required to enter into some agreement with that developer to create some sort of a parking operation for him to try and recover some of his or her costs related to that project. But in any event, we would have to construct some parking because the requirement from both SBCTA and Metrolink, as well, in addition, the construction authority, is that we have to maintain the 1,600 space parking that is currently there. Now, on the south side of tracks, in relation to the Village Partners project, we are already in an effort to acquire property that is part of that project, as required by us under the North Montclair Downtown Specific Plan. Under that discussion with the village partners, we will be acquiring land to develop a parking structure on that property. That parking structure will house approximately 300 cars, so that could potentially diminish the requirement for 1,600 parking spaces on the north side of the tracks, but we are still in discussions with village partners as it relates to acquisition of that land. Okay, hold on. Oh, okay. All right, just take it out then. And you'll see as we go in the discussion, there will be a bullet point about the parking structure, and the estimated cost of that is $8 million. That's based on a 300-car parking structure at the cost of approximately $26,000 per space. That is the prevailing rate for a parking space in a parking structure in the Los Angeles area.
Oh, thank you. And I just noticed the first one on this slide, the Monte Vista Avenue median and pavement rehabilitation, is a duplicate from my previous slide, so you can disregard that $2.5 million for that project. Citywide fiber optic cable master plan estimated at $2.065 million. Central Avenue Arrow Highway Mixed Use District Complete Streets Plan. It's undeterminate right now what that might cost. Citywide striping project, phase 1, estimated at $200,000. Fire station landscape improvements, estimated at $30,000. Ramota Avenue Brook Street traffic signal installation, estimated at $250,000. Saratoga Park improvements, estimated at $2 million. Freedom Plaza improvements, estimated at $100,000. Park master plan study, estimated at $200,000. MacArthur Park improvements, Kingsley Park improvements, and Essex Park improvements, as well as Marino Vista Park improvements, all estimated at $1 million each.
Now, in these various parks, including the two on the next slide, Sunrise and Sunset, a lot of this relates to the irrigation systems. All of them have to be replaced. In addition, there are walls that need to be replaced. And in some areas, for example, in Sunrise Park, there is adjacent land that is available for purchase that would allow us to expand the park. Also at MacArthur Park, there is adjacent land that is also available that the city could purchase to expand the park. And it would be our interest in recommending to the council that adding on to available park space for the Montclair community is an important consideration.
So the Sunset Park improvements are estimated at $500,000. Sunrise Park improvements estimated at $300,000. Then we also have the San Antonio Channel Parkway. That estimate is undetermined at this time. City Hall remodel facade landscape improvements, phase 3, it's estimated at $1.2 million. Library restroom improvements estimated at $350,000.
Now, I want to point out that the $350,000 here is estimated on two things. It is remodeling the existing restrooms that are connected to the theater room, and then we need to construct separate restrooms for the library, which would represent a bulk of the $350,000.
And then Civic Center exterior painting estimated at $265,000. Reader Ranch exterior improvements estimated at $150,000.
And the reason for this is that we cannot use CDBG money for the exterior improvements such as painting of the building at Reader Ranch, or for that matter, the interior improvements as well. So this would have to come out from a different source other than CDBG funding. And this probably represents one of the final expenditures by the city as it relates to improvements at the Reader Ranch property, separate from the $5.4 million that we have received in state grant funding for development of the adjacent parkland.
And we have the Central Avenue Bridge Rehabilitation Replacement Project. And right now the city portion is undetermined. The project cost is approximately $30 million with $15 million state grant received by the city.
We will try to go after additional grants to complete this project. But at this point in time, we are unclear as to whether or not we will be successful in that. We don't anticipate that we will have to put in the additional $15 million. We don't think we will have to put in anything because of our efforts to complete this project by obtaining additional state and/or federal grant dollars for it.
The Systemic Safety Analysis Safe Routes to School Plan, the estimate is undetermined at this time. Report projects up to $28,101,900 based on scope of projects completed. And then lastly, we have the public parking garage at Village at Montclair Trans Center. It's estimated as $8 million. So the total Measure L bond projects estimate is $47,145,000.
And that would now be reduced by $2.5 million because I have the Monte Vista Avenue in there twice.
Correct. And this estimate does not include undetermined project costs, including purchase of Caltrans property, systemic safety analysis report, Central Avenue Bridge Rehabilitation Replacement Project,
Finish what you were saying.
San Antonio Channel Parkway, Central Avenue Arrow Highway Mixed Use District Complete Streets Plan.
Okay, and I apologize. I want to go back to the $47,145,000. That would not be reduced because I did not actually count the Monte Vista twice. What happened is I was realigning the projects on the respective pages, and I just happened to not delete that when I had moved it to another page. So it actually is not a repeat as far as the dollar amount. So the dollar amount is $47,145,000 based on those total projects.
So the finance mechanism, potential $47.145 million bond issue. Annual payment over 30 years equals $2.7 million. And we're basing this on our 2014 issue of lease revenue bonds at $45 million.
And the interest rates now are lower, so we think that this is at least a good number, and it could be even less based on the comparative interest rates then versus now.
And the bond funds must be expended over a 3-year period. Infrastructure projects can be prioritized and funded over a period of years using multiple bond issues. So is there any questions before we move on to?
Any council have any questions or comments on this item? Let me see any hands raised. Let me see. Nobody has any comments or questions to state here? Well, I think this is a good start on the capital projects on utilizing Measure L, and I'm a firm believer that we have we can do a lot of improvements in the city. Streets, of course, is one. Parks is the second one that the public definitely supports. I know we were given quite a few projects this evening, probably for some of us seeing some of these projects for the first time. So I think what's worthwhile to do next is let's schedule a workshop to go through all this stuff, prioritize these projects, and then at least we can give staff some directions on, where do we start on the improvement side. And I also, the one who talked about having some type of a citizen advisory group kind of help us on what we're doing. So I'm thinking that maybe what we need to do as council is we'll go ahead and work on this first, and then we'll have a little advisory committee to kind of look at what we're doing and see if they're comfortable with what we're doing before we finalize anything. But I'm not going to have that discussion today, but I think what we do is we schedule a workshop. I don't know if that's going to be, we do that during the month of May. I know in June we got the new annual budget to be workshop. So I know staff will be busy on that, or do we wait until July to do this once the budget is adopted? Do you have a preference, staff, if we had a workshop on this, when we should do it?
We would need to contact our public finance consultant so that we can start getting some fresh numbers. These numbers date back to August 2020. We would want to give you more current and better numbers so that you can know what you're looking at as far as what the potential bond amounts might be. And then that will give you an idea of the number of projects you can do now. If you want to put some of the larger projects up front, that would give you that flexibility in making that determination. So give us an opportunity to talk to our public finance consultant to get some numbers worked, and then we can come back to you not only with those numbers, but then with recommendations as to how you might want to consider prioritizing these various projects. And then we'll also give you that date where we think we can bring this workshop back to you. I would expect that it will be sometime in the summer.
All right, so so we're looking after June, basically summertime, and which is fine. Mayor Pro Tem Rue, you have, go ahead. Your hands up.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I concur with what you said about prioritizing these projects. I think it's important. This gives all of us a little time to distill this and see which ones individually we think are important. And then when we get together and meet as a group, we will have a better way to start it. So I concur with that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Again, I'm a firm believer again that parks and street pavement should be number one right now. It's high priority. And I also see that we did our systematic street improvements, if I'm saying that correctly now. I apologize if I'm not. And I know Howard and Ramona was added in there as a project, but have we talked about minor improvements we can do under the systemic safety analysis report that we can pay out of capital projects, like flashing lights, those type of things to help ease traffic and also improve safety?
Well, things that we can put in the budget for next year, like what you're talking about, we will do that. And those don't necessarily need to be part of a bond measure.
Okay.
But a number of the projects in that systemic analysis are very expensive and would be subject to being funded under the projects. But when we bring back this item to you as a workshop, we will break out all of those various projects so that you have all of them to look at, not just as a general grouping as it was presented to you this evening.
Okay. And the other question I have is, have we looked at, I call safety analysis of our buildings, City Hall, Police Department, Fire Department, what we need to do some upgrades to improve safety? Is that a part of this bond measure, or that could be part of next year's fiscal budget?
On safety, are you talking about reinforcing buildings? What I'm not sure I understand.
More, the issue one good example is what we dealt with last spring with demonstrations, ensuring that people don't break into buildings. I know the police department last calendar year had 2 separate incidents, one at the front lobby, a second incident, the door of the firing range as an example, where we can do things to help enhance the safety of our buildings. Fine.
Well, the one item that was discussed referencing improvements at the police facility did include some of those safety measures that you are addressing in that cost estimate there.
Okay.
We did not extend that to other city facilities. City Hall is pretty open all the way around. It would be kind of difficult to create a secure environment around City Hall. But as you know, as part of the phase 2 remodel at City Hall, we did put up safety glass around the finance facility. Right. Under phase 3, we would anticipate doing that in the community development facility, our area. And we also plan on putting up safety glass doors that lead into the administrative office area. So internally, we would create those safety precautions constructed into the facility, but not externally. And then we could obviously look at the same thing as it relates to the other city facilities as appropriate.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Lopez, I think I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Several questions, but my first one is this. Is it the thinking that we potentially float and obtain a bond to immediately fund these projects, and then Measure L revenue that comes in would then pay the yearly payment and interest on those bonds?
Yes, that would be the intent.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. So thank you for that. And I do have several questions based on the bullet points that that were discussed. The San Bernardino Street screen wall, you mentioned the brick wall. You're saying from Monte Vista to Fremont only, that wall on the south side of the street?
Well, it goes from Fremont essentially past Monte Vista. Well, it's two segments of it. One is the section across from the hospital between Monte Vista and Fremont Avenue.
Okay.
That wall is very deteriorated. It is the wall. The entire length of it is owned by the private property owners. And again, we can't touch the wall, but we can put up separate screening on city right-of-way in order to create a more attractive appearance for that area. And then on the west side of Monte Vista Avenue at different sections, there are other areas of the wall that we would need to look at that may also need that sort of treatment, but those walls are in better condition.
Okay, so the wall that comes to mind real quickly would be the one where San Bernardino Street curves as it goes to Mills.
Yes, that is the area I'm thinking of.
Okay, then we're on the same page there. Thank you for that. When was the right-of-way acquired for those private homeowners on the east side of Monte Vista between San Bernardino and Benito?
Councilmember Lopez, I would have to tell you that predates anyone here. I would think that it probably went back to the early 60s at the latest, and it may actually have been back in the 50s when those homes were constructed, and the need to bring or at least create some width to that particular area. There was a acquisition. Our presumption is that there was an acquisition of right-of-way, or when those homes were built, they were required basically to have no front yard frontage, and I don't believe that that would have been the case. I doubt that planning at that time would have allowed that. So we believe that right-of-way was required at some point in time from those properties.
So it's likely that the present homeowners are probably unaware of that then?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. Bear with me. Okay, the Monte Vista Avenue median and pavement rehabilitation. Are we just talking Monte Vista north of the 10 freeway?
That little area south of the 10 freeway and then north of the 10 freeway.
Okay,
Yes.
south. Look, there's a tiny bit of it. Trying to think since I drive that every day. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. South of the 10 on Monte Vista. Refresh my memory where that is, where you're thinking, because I can't visualize that at the moment.
Right at Palo Verde, at the Palo Verde and 10 freeway intersection,
Okay,
just to the south, there is a median island. Now, that is within the 250-foot Caltrans coverage area. We would have to obviously have Caltrans approval to do modifications there. It would mostly have to be soft improvements. I mean, we can do the curbing and we can do some landscape improvements, but it would mostly have to be soft improvements because that is what Caltrans now requires within their area of coverage near their intersection areas of responsibility.
Okay. Now the fire station landscaping improvements. Has there not been any discussion with respect to funding any improvements for the actual stations themselves? I would say that I think they were built in the 60s. They haven't had any serious retrofits and upgrades. I was kind of hoping that we could, with Measure L on the books, that we could look at perhaps either bringing those up to modern times, remodeling, enhancing, building upon them. Because I know we got some plumbing issues there. There's a whole series of issues regarding locker rooms. The building's old. Both buildings are old. If anybody's been in them lately, you can see that. I would like to see, other than just landscaping, I'd like to see some improvements there on expansion, upgrades, and so forth with respect to both fire stations, other than just landscaping. And that then reminded me, perhaps at a later time, Mr. City Manager, you can update me on the landscaping status of Station 2. It looks incomplete at the moment. I know we talked about that briefly about a month ago. Let's see.
Yeah, as you can see, the improvements based on the list that was provided to you, the list of improvements to city facilities is being phased in. Obviously, as you know, we constructed a new police facility over a decade ago. We did improvements to the senior center, or rather we constructed a senior center. Then we took the old police building and made improvements to it through the Measure F monies for all of those 3 projects that I just mentioned. Then we made improvements to the community center. And the next phase, or the current phase that we have been working on, are the city hall improvements, civic center improvements, and future phases will incorporate the fire station as well, or the 2 fire stations, as well as the city yard facilities. But those haven't been analyzed at this point in time, so I could not put them on the list to give you any estimates as what they would be, but those will certainly be additional phases of improvements to city facilities coming down the road.
You know, I just want to comment. I think, again, we really need to emphasize improvements that benefit the public directly. You know, I know we did improvements to this facility, City Hall facility, and then also PD, but we really need to get the improvements out there on the streets. And if we're going to do other building improvements, got to have an analysis, got to determine, you know, what modernization you're going to do, what are the issues are. We don't have that right now, but I think it's important that we've got to put this out in the streets immediately in terms of improvements the public directly benefits.
Just 3 more questions briefly. The library restroom improvements, did you say that this is for bathrooms near the theater room?
It's for the remodel of the bathrooms near the theater room and the construction of new bathrooms, restroom facilities for the library itself. The library doesn't have bathrooms directly in the library area. They have to come around out through that secured door into that corridor area right outside of the theater room. So there is a need to construct separate bathrooms for library patrons. And those bathrooms probably would be constructed in relation to the area that is outside of the library that currently serves as an open, unused area between the theater room and another room that is used by the library personnel as a computer training area, and then the main library facility.
Okay. The Central Avenue Bridge Rehabilitation Project, you have a projected cost of 30 million with 15 received via a state grant. So we're in a projected deficit of 15 million that we still need, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one, the public parking garage at the Village at Montclair Tram Center, you estimate it to be 8 million. Is that not on the property of the development the council just recently approved, or is it adjacent to? Trying to picture where it is.
No, it's on the property in the northeast corner next to the Pep Boys.
Okay.
We are in negotiations with the property owner to acquire that property. They are required under the North Montclair Downtown Specific Plan to provide that land to the city through purchase agreement for the purpose of constructing a parking garage. It is already incorporated into the development plan, the site plan for the property. The developer has no intention of constructing anything there because they know that that is reserved for a parking garage, and they need to enter into an agreement with the city for that purpose.
So that was then incorporated into the plan that council approved on December 7th?
Yes, it is. Well, the parking structure was not part of the plan's approval, but the land is vacant and it is designated pursuant to that plan that was approved by the council as a future parking structure, a public parking structure.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for indulging me. And
I do want to say that over the course of the last 5 years, of course, really the last 6 years, all of Measure F has been dedicated to basically public infrastructure improvements, with only a very minor amount that was made available to City Hall renovation. So the effort has always been towards public street improvements and other improvements for the community at large.
Okay, so staff will come back to the city council probably sometime this summer, and we'll go through this exercise. And then if a council member thinks something's missing there, then perhaps you can notify the city manager if something's missing here. Maybe that's the best way to do it, and then we'll talk about it in the summertime and go through it. Does that sound
Right, right. And just to give you an idea of the scope of things that you can do. So while we are talking about a $47 million bond measure here, keep in mind that the 2014 issue was a $45 million bond, but of that $45 million, only 23 million was available for infrastructure improvement projects. The rest of that bond went to pay off the 2005 issue. So think of everything that we did over the course of the last 5 to 6 years with $23 million, and imagine the scope of things that you can now do going forward with $45 million.
right? Okay, sounds good.
And that's just one bond in which you are committing approximately $2.7 million in that future Measure L money that is coming to you on an annual basis, probably in excess of $8 million annually.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to the CalPERS system.
Okay, thank you. So on our last section of this presentation, we're going to discuss the California Public Employees Retirement System. So we're going to discuss the CalPERS status and rate increases. Over the last decade, CalPERS has annually made significant increases to Montclair's pension costs to address actuarial increases in the employer contribution rate, unfunded actuarial accrued liability, or UAL, reductions in CalPERS earnings assumptions, and program administration requirements. From fiscal year 2013 to 2014 to present, 21-22, the combined CalPERS rate will have increased by an estimated 162.95%. Montclair's fiscal year 2021-22 CalPERS payment estimate is $7,815,711, representing a projected cumulative increase of $4,843,370 over the 9-year period. Montclair's CalPERS increase for fiscal year 2021-2022 is estimated to be 8.9%, or $643,811, and this is for the unfunded liability. The city will make a lump sum payment, reducing the liability by $198,231 for early payment incentive, bringing the adjusted rate to $450,842.
Now, you will recall that over the last couple of years, we adopted this practice of making the lump sum payment rather than making quarterly payments as billed by CalPERS. This has annually provided us a savings of this typical amount. And obviously, as long as we have the money available to do it, this would obviously be the way to go, making the lump sum payment at the beginning of the year.
So for fiscal year 2019-20, CalPERS actual rates included the following. UAL was $4,704,684, and our normal costs were $1,882,889, for a total of $6,587,573. For fiscal year 2020-21, CalPERS rate estimates follow. UAL, $5,133,702, normal costs, $2,104,080, for a total of $7,237,782. So CalPERS has increased the employer portion of retirement contributions for fiscal year 2021-22 relating to the City of Montclair's employee groups. The increases and the funding status applicable to these plans are as follows. So you can see the increases, or some of them are a little bit of a decrease depending on the plan. But it's an overall increase for next fiscal year of 8.98%. The primary CalPERS rate growth issue is the unfunded actuarial accrued liability. The unfunded liability at June 30th, 2019 is $77,699,081.
So when we're talking about a pension bond, that's the number we're talking about right there, that $77 million. And then the next bullet is just shocking.
This represents an increase of $3,033,527 over the prior year.
So that one benefit has increased by $3 million just over 1 year, that unfunded liability. And you will see as she goes through this, this is not uncommon.
So annual $3 million plus increases in the unfunded liability is not sustainable. Increases over the previous 3 years has been inconsistent, with much of rate increase driven by a 7.25% rate of assumption. So for the last 3 years, the year ending June 30th, 2016, we had a $12,867,997 increase over the prior year. Year ending June 30th, 2017, the increase was $1,452,501 over the prior year. Year ending June 30th, 2018, there was an $8,485,255 increase over the prior year.
Now, keep in mind again, this is the increases in the UAL, not the increase in the city's annual payment.
Right.
The UAL increases, it keeps getting bigger and bigger. That is the unfunded portion that we owe CalPERS to cover the cost of all of our employees and the current retirees or annuitants. So if CalPERS was to have to pay them all off for some reason, this is what they estimate that they would have to put into paying off what the current unfunded liability component is for them. Plus, the city would still have to keep making annual payments.
So the annual CalPERS increases.
Now, by the way, I want to make it clear that that's different. What I just said is different than buying out of CalPERS. To buy out of CalPERS would probably cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million. The reason for that is that CalPERS penalizes you to exit the system. So, for example, while they claim that they are earning 7.25% on their earnings, on their investments on an annual basis, the reality is that they are earning significantly less. So what that means is that if you try to buy out of the system, they're telling you that they're making much less than that 7.25%, and you have to make up the difference of that 7.25% over the cost of the lives of all of the employees and the annuitants in your organization that will take advantage of the retirement. And that's why that number will inflate to that $300 million cost of exiting the system.
So the annual CalPERS increases to the UAL justify consideration of pension bond financing. In order to stabilize annual CalPERS increases, staff is exploring a lower rate pension bond option as a replacement to the UAL and its 7.25% annual actuarial rate of assumption. Annual payment on pension bond would be processed primarily with general funds presently allocated for UAL payment, current estimate being $5,133,702. The city would still have obligation for the employer's share of normal costs, current estimate being $2,104,080 as a budgeted expense. In 2020, city staff asked Hilltop Securities, Montclair's public finance counselor, to evaluate debt service solutions related to pension bond financing. Pension bond debt service solutions on the following 3 slides is based on data obtained in August 2020 using a CalPERS UAL of $76.7 million. So with a bell curve debt service solution using $76.7 million needed, there would be a savings of $27.9 million, 37% over the paying the unfunded liability on a yearly basis.
Now, if you look at this slide, you'll see that the debt service, that is the third column from the left, it fluctuates year to year. So those are the payments that we would have to make on an annual basis in order to pay off that $76 million that we would borrow under this bond issue under a bell curve. So even if you look at this, if you look at that column under debt service, it starts at $4 million and it ultimately climbs to an annual payment of about $6.8 million in 2032. I mean, $6.9 million in 2033, and then it starts to decline. But even under this scenario, at that $6.9 million in 2033, you can see that that's not far above the $5 million plus that we're paying to CalPERS right now on the UAL. And keep in mind that that UAL payment, if we continued to pay CalPERS directly, that number would ultimately climb to a 9, 10, and maybe even a $13 million annual payment to CalPERS under that UAL payment to CalPERS. So this creates some stabilization even under the bell curve.
So on the next slide is a level debt service to fiscal year 2040, and this would be a 27.7 million savings. So on this one, it's a level debt service payment. Fluctuates a little bit, a couple thousand every year, but it's pretty much at 5.4 million throughout the entire bond time period.
And in the second column, you see what the actual projected UAL payments would be to CalPERS based on what we're talking about. So you can see that the debt service here is $5.4 million consistently throughout the debt service period. But you can see in the UAL payment column, the second one from the left, the payment structure goes from 5.9 million, 6.4, up to $8.7 million in 2033. So there's a big difference between what we would be paying to CalPERS on an annual basis under the UAL versus the stabilization under the debt service. And it isn't until you get to 2041 under the UAL payment that you start seeing that UAL payment start to decline to a number that is comparable to what we're paying under annual debt service. Now, admittedly, the payment to CalPERS under the UAL eventually decreases to a very small amount, but by then we've already paid off the bond debt to the bond issue.
So this next slide is showing level debt service to the year 2045, and that would be a 26.2 million savings.
Now here you can see that the debt service annual payment is significantly less, even below the previous debt service payment. Where this one becomes important is, will be discussed in the following slides, but just to give you a preview, is that even if we paid off the UAL, there are fluctuations that will occur in CalPERS's investment processes, as well as the earning power and the life expectancy of employees, as well as the annuitants. And just because we would pay off the UAL under the bonded approach, there will still be annual UAL adjustments that will occur. But those UAL payments, we would probably be able to address on an annual payment schedule, and we would recommend that we annually pay off those UAL increases. So by picking this particular choice, where we keep the payment at about $4.6 million a year, we clearly already have about a $500,000 to $1 million annually available to stay on top of those new fluctuations in UAL payments that would fall out of the bonded debt.
Okay, so benefits associated with pension bonding. It stabilizes the CalPERS annual payment on the UAL. CalPERS accrued rate of assumption on the UAL is 7.25%, adjusted annually, producing significant annual rate increases. Pension bond interest rates are substantially lower based on prevailing rates, producing stabilized debt service and significant annual savings. 27.9 million on a bell curve over 20 years, 27.7 million on a level debt solution over 19 years, and $26.2 million on a level debt service over 24 years. Benefits associated with pension bonding continued. Under CalPERS control, the UAL and normal cost range values are constantly changing as the pension fund makes actuarial changes to its methodology for funding pension benefits, reducing earning assumptions, mortality recognition, annuitant earnings, investment strategy changes, market and investment fluidity, and passing losses on to client agencies. Pension bonding stabilizes the UAL under a level debt service issue or a fluctuating rate under a bell curve debt service issue.
So that is the primary benefit, and the reason why you would want to consider doing that. But as you know, we've also discussed with you in the past our concerns, our trepidation, and so this will discuss some of the risks that are associated with potentially going down the pension bond avenue.
All right, so the risks associated with the pension bond. Bond proceeds would be paid to CalPERS for control and investment. With limited exceptions, pension bonds do not allow for establishing a trust with local control of funds.
Now, we can take these two just separately for a second. The first one, we would be giving PERS that $76 million or whatever we would choose to bond the unfunded liability for. You could bond the full amount, you could bond only a portion of it. It depends on the direction that you would want to go. But you are handing over that money to CalPERS and you're trusting in their investment. Now, if you look back over the past decade, there is reason to question CalPERS' investment strategies given the losses that they've experienced. But on the other hand, not giving the bond money to CalPERS and still trusting their investment strategy, clearly the UAL that we are experiencing now is a result of their investment strategies and the losses that they have incurred. So either way, we're going to get stuck with their improvements or their failures in their investment strategy approaches.
So after the proceeds are deposited with CalPERS, actuarial changes by the pension fund will produce new UAL that will require annual payment maintenance.
And that is what I was talking about earlier, that even if you give them the $76 million, we'll still have future UAL because that future UAL is not covered by the money we would be giving them now, but that UAL is manageable. It will come in at, basically maybe $1 million a year. We can pay off that $1 million a year.
This new UAL would be in addition to the normal cost rate and debt service. The new UAL should be paid off on an annual basis and is eventually controllable or eliminated over time.
And the UAL, the reason why it exists is because of CalPERS' investment strategies. They're convincing agencies to make the improvements in pension formulas. That was the big one, obviously, back in 2002, when cities up and down California made significant improvements to their pension formula. CalPERS promised that there would be no impact on the employer rate, but in fact, what we saw the very next year was immediate impact. So in 2001, the employer rate for the city of Montclair, for example, related to public safety pension funds was 0. The very following year, after there was an improvement in the safety formula, the employer rate for public safety costs skyrocketed immediately to $2 million in 1 year. And that has continued unabated ever since then.
So continuing with the risks, if CalPERS substantially impairs the bonded asset either through their actions and or market volatility, the city would be liable for the loss through imposition of new UAL costs. It is noted that any loss by CalPERS would impact Montclair's UAL with or without pension bonds. Local debt service would continue on pension bonds despite any loss of bond assets by CalPERS.
And that's important. I mean, obviously, if we gave CalPERS $76 million and they lost $30 million of it in bad investments, because we can't tell them where to invest the dollars, that's not our right, we would still be obligated for the full $76 million and interest on the pension payments. But as I said, in the end, maybe it doesn't matter because the money that they would lose in their normal investment strategy, they pass on to us anyway in increases in the UAL.
So there are ways that we can potentially reduce pension bond risk. Annually allocate revenues to maintain annual pay down of new UAL. Allocate revenues to redeem pension bond ahead of schedule. It is noted that early bond redemption cannot generally occur for a period of up to 10 years. Pension bonding addresses the UAL at the time of bonding. As revised pension rules take effect and lower pension formulas dominate, the UAL will significantly decrease or be eliminated over the next 30 years. So this ends our presentation for the fiscal year 2020-21 mid-year budget review, and we're open to questions or comments.
Any questions for council members from council members? I don't see any hands going up. No. Nobody wants to talk but me. You guys want to listen to what I have to say? Sure. Well, I'll say this. This is obviously, I've been saying the big gorilla in the room that I think Bill and I have been hearing about since, I don't know, 2011, 2010, getting there. And I appreciate staff having this report today. This is probably the most detailed report to consider a bond, pension bond. And there was obviously 3 options here. When I see all 3 options here, this looks very promising. I like what I see in the 3 options on 65, page 66, and page 67. But I think, you know, city council needs to really understand, including myself, the risk associated with the pension bond. And that's obviously outlined on page 70, page 71, and of course on page 72. Staff talked about ways to reduce the risk. So at this time, Ed, what's staff going to recommend? Where are we going? Because I think I suspect my colleagues want to still pursue the bond measure, or at least consideration the bond measure, but obviously we want to really understand the risks factors as well. But where do we go next, Ed?
Well, I have become more comfortable with the idea of the pension bond. As you know, over the last couple of years, I have expressed my reservations because of CalPERS's performance on their investment strategies. They have made some strategic improvements, and there is a conservative investment strategy that is now in place, and most of these funds would probably fall within that conservative strategy. I'm less concerned with their losing any funds that are invested with them. There is also the opportunity to enter into an agreement with CalPERS that provides not a trust, but a form of a trust in which we can have some directional control over the investments. Now, whether or not that is a good idea remains to be discussed further. We're not professional investors. CalPERS hires people, paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in annual earnings, who do this as a living, and hopefully they would provide us the best insight. But the idea behind that particular shared trust component is that we at least have the opportunity to have some input. But please keep in mind that this is a very limited trust opportunity. It really doesn't give us a lot of flexibility or options, and it certainly doesn't give us much in the way of control. But we will explore that a little bit further. But I am a lot more comfortable now with considering this as an option. We will go back to our public finance consultant, ask her to work up some new numbers in all 3 of these areas, the bell curve, as well as a number of level payment strategies. And we'll come back and do another workshop with the council to give you our recommendation as to where to go at that point in time.
Okay, Councilman Rue, Mayor Pro Tem Rue.
Unmute.
Go ahead, Bill.
Unmute. One of the, and look at the pension bond strategy. I know that there are drawbacks. There are a lot of them. They were outlined this evening. But I think it may, in fact, I think this is the direction we're going in, to at least look at it and examine it. One of the things that I like about it is it does give a certain degree of certainty. Right now with CalPERS, we just see this going up every year. With the pension bond, given everything that's equal, we might be able to budget with not just more certainty, but we're going to be able to have a very predictable budget that way. Right now, it's unpredictable with CalPERS. So that's just something to think about, just my.
Okay. So again, the consensus, I believe, with council is for staff to come back at a later date to consider the pension bonds, and obviously we'll further think about the risks involved. And I think staff will work on that further. So if there's no further comments from council on the pensions, we do have a recommendation from the mid-year budget review, and it's in your staff report. If I pull the staff report, the recommendation, I believe, is on page 7. The recommendation is for staff recommends city council consider the city mid-year budget review documents for both revenues and appropriations proposed for the current fiscal year, and also allocation of $1,065,900 to be placed into the unassigned general operating fund. So is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
To approve the recommendation as submitted.
Councilmember Johnson went first, and then I believe Mayor Pro Tem, you're seconding the motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right, City Clerk, can you please take a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lopez,
No.
Councilmember Martinez,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Rue,
Aye.
Mayor Dutray,
Aye. So is that the Councilmember Lopez, did you vote no?
Yes, I did vote no.
Is there a reason why you vote no?
I have a variety of reasons, but I will withhold from explaining them.
Okay, well, I do
I
believe,
have some reservations, but they're things I need to look at before we address this further.
well, I'll make the comment here that this is a very challenging budget that was put together by the city staff back in June because of the coronavirus. And I think it's very promising that we are here in mid-year budget, and that the mid-year budget obviously has allowed us, and of course that will help the Measure L to ensure the budget is balanced. And I think going forward, we will see what the HDL report comes back in for our December Christmas sales, and then we'll see if Congress moves forward with their $1.9 trillion, which Montclair may get about $7 million out of that if I do the math correctly. That we may have a hopefully a much stronger budget financial position when we consider the budget in June. So with that, the mid-year has been adopted 4-1.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think before I have to ask for any public comments or any members of the public there. If not, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.